Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Wasn't that just a spectacular, wonderful concert? Just another round of applause for our wonderful musicians. Before we start talking to them, just a quick ad break. At 11:30, there's one more chance for you to be led around by some art experts who will tell you all about these wonderful artworks, where they come from, and what the story is behind that whole project called Karoo Kaarte. That's at 11:30. And then this afternoon at 2:30, we have one more concert by Magdalene Minnaar, Estia Creer, and Rosamund playing again for the Little Maestros concert. So for those of you who haven't marched and danced and enjoyed some music with us, that's your chance at 2:30. And then our concert at 1 o'clock, of course, is Lig op die Horizon. So first up, in a trio, I also have a trio, so that's why I'm interested to know, between the three of you, who's really the boss? Because it's not necessarily the one with the highest instrument or the biggest instrument, or is this a democracy we see before our eyes?
It's the one with the mic.
The one with the mic. It's like the one with the remote control.
No, well, I'll hand the mic over in a second, but at least one of the reasons this music is interesting to me as a cellist, the further back in music history you go, the more important the bass line is. So when we play, it's one of the few combinations where I really feel like I do have a voice in the ensemble, because the voices that we play are very much based on an older style of music, a polyphonic style where all the voices are equally important. It's really very much like a dialogue between three. That's at least from my perspective.
Yes, so first up, let me just ask you to maybe each introduce yourselves and then say, how long have you been doing this Baroque thing, and where did it start for you? Just do that, your name and Baroque and how long and where.
My name is Rosamund Ender. I started off as a classical cellist, and always been really, really in love with Baroque music, especially Bach. I mean, who isn't, right? I see you. But then during COVID, I was living in Switzerland and studying and working there. I had the chance, so I suddenly had lots of free time, and I finally had the chance and the access to the instrument and the teaching over there to finally learn the viola da gamba. So that was an amazing opportunity for me.
My name is Ralitza, and I grew up in Bulgaria, in communistic Bulgaria, where Baroque music was very much highly influenced by the Russian school, where it's lots of vibrato and very romantic performance. But when I came to South Africa 25 years ago, through colleagues and through visiting artists, I got hooked into this Baroque music, and I went to study a little bit in Basel in Swiss with Chiara Bonchini, and then I got my own Baroque violins, and that's it. That's my short story for Baroque.
Relitza, I can't believe you have been in South Africa for 25 years. You look 25 years old, so that makes no sense.
Hello, I'm Annien. I started being interested in Baroque playing, actually with Ralitza in Durban. But then when I went to further my studies in the UK, I was given an actual Baroque instrument to play, and I studied with Pauline Norbs there. And that's how my journey went a little bit further on the actual gut string situation, which was, it changes your outlook on how to approach the instrument rather than just having a style on modern strings.
So thank you very much. That's always insightful, because I think most people don't understand that there's really a big difference between being a normal classical musician on a modern classical instrument, or playing Baroque music and specializing and playing old period type instruments. And for me, as a pianist, playing on older keyboard instrument always feels like getting into a very old car, where the clutch gets stuck and the gears won't go and it makes a funny sound and it can't drive fast. Do you have the same experience playing on
Yes.
a Baroque instrument? And then why, in heaven's name, would you want to do it for longer than 2 minutes?
We ask ourselves that on rainy days, I promise you. So the gut strings, they don't speak as easy as the metal strings. So when you start to bow, you can't just go. You have to first lean and activate the string. And the thicker the string, Rosamund, the harder it is actually to activate it. So it does take a lot of weight, not pronation like we would use on modern instrument, but actual hanging weight, which is a different part of your hand that then feels the bow. And also the tuning is different, where the modern violin would take the metal strings and widen the fifth to be in equal temperament to match Charles' beautiful piano playing. The Baroque strings, we don't have to do that because the piano was, or equal temperament tuning was not a thing back then. So what we did today is we tuned to the appropriate 415 hertz for an A, which is why the perfect pitch people would have heard our A's sound like G sharps or roundabout G sharps. Also that the fifths were not, as we know them, they are slightly, because we tune to quarter comma mean tone tuning, the fifths are slightly narrower, my Afrikaans coming out, narrower. But that would also mean that when we play our open strings together, it might sound slightly out of tune than what we would hear on a normal modern violin. But that also has to do with the resonance and the sonority of the instruments and how to help carry the chords that the composers had in mind. So we try and perform these pieces as the composers would have intended to have them sound when they wrote them. And for us to play them on modern instruments in equal temperament takes a little bit away of the intentions the composers had, which is why we do it for longer than 2 minutes.
Annien, net 'n Afrikaanse vraag as ek mag, just for a moment. I know you don't understand Afrikaans, but don't worry.
Mengels
This
is
won't
good.
be about won't be
great.
about you. How much do you still, hoe baie speel jy nog barokmusiek versus moderne viool, of het jy nou besluit
Sjoe,
jy het
ken jy
tot
my?
bekering gekom, jy speel net barokviool?
Nee, ons al drie van ons is redelike voorstanders van nuwe moderne musiek ook. So ons speel nie net die gewone moderne musiek wat almal ken nie, ons speel barok, modern en splinternuwe modern. So ons doen regtig vreeslik baie moderne werk en wat moeilik is vir ons om te gaan van die barok instrumente na die moderne instrumente, maar ons is nou al 'n bietjie gewoond daaraan. Ek kry vir Rosamund verskriklik jammer want op die oomblik want sy spring van 'n moderne cello, nie 'n barok cello nie, maar moderne cello na 'n viola da gamba. En ek weet nie of julle gesien het nie, sy het 2 meesnore. Hoeveel snore het jy meer? How many strings on the gamba? Seven instead of 4 strings on the viola da gamba. So dit vat vir verskriklik baie breinkrag om te slaan nie net van die staalsnare nie, staalsnaar na gutsnaar, maar 4 snare na 7 snare toe. Dit is wil gedoen wees.
Baie dankie. Rosamund, one question about your viola di gamba. The most interesting thing, I always thought they forgot to insert that peg until I realized, no, there is no peg for where the instrument stands. You have to knyp hom vas, like I do with my cell phone when I have to do other things with my hands. How do you not, in a nervous moment, crush your viola da gamba? Because I sometimes do this with my legs. If I get nervous at the piano, I would be a danger to your instrument. How does that feel? Or how do you control it? Or does it just sit there?
That's a very interesting question. We learn how to sit so that the legs are in a position to just be like a basket for the thing. So it's kind
Okay,
of
so it'll
resting
rest.
on the calves, actually.
Yes.
And we don't use they only started using a pin. I'm not going to be accurate in this, but there are paintings depicting even cellists on the modern cello playing on cushions or tiny stools into the 19th century. So the peg is a very modern invention. I think a lot having to do with the latest version of the modern cello, which is, as you know, steel strings, extremely high bridge, a lot of tension on the instrument. So you need to put an incredible amount of physical force into the instrument to make it sound good. It doesn't always look like professionals. You don't see it. Look at Peter Martens. It looks like he's just going down the road having a picnic, but it's a lot of work. These older instruments are constructed very differently. The wood is much thinner. And as you might have noticed, if I play on the very low strings, I have to bring the instrument forward to be able to reach the strings at the correct angle, exactly. And that wouldn't be possible if it were on a pin. So it's a lot more movement, a lot more flexibility. And I have to move a lot more because there are so many strings. I have to be able to rotate myself.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Ralitza, now I have a question for you, a general music lover's question. Sometimes in the good old days, when you could still walk into a CD shop and buy CDs like you can do here, ladies and gentlemen, next door, you sometimes see these classical music for dummies, or music to study with, or classical music for your mother-in-law, or whatever the CD said. You could buy specifically themed CDs. We all know that Baroque music somehow is good to study with. And when I finished school in my last exams at school, I also actively listened to Baroque music to try and get better marks in maths. I can tell you that it's a myth, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't work. My maths marks were very bad. Ralitza, why do people like Baroque music? Just from far away. Why are there so many people here? Why did they not sleep late this morning?
Especially the newest recording since we discovered the historically informed performance practice. Like kind of opened the veil of Baroque music, which was usually performed always very, very rigid. Like I'm talking recordings in the mid 20th century, like old-fashioned, very influenced by romantic music. So we hear this, we always used to associate Baroque music with this rigidness and strong strength and kind of trumpets and more pomposo type of style. But the more we know and discover, even playing Messiah, the more we play these very famous pieces, we discover actually Baroque music is very personal, very intimate, and really goes into your heart in a special way that it is not romantic, it is very pure and sincere. And I think when this childlike purity and spontaneity, it's hidden there in this music that is deep and pure like none of other styles. Beautiful other styles. I cannot say classical music has their other dimensions and romantic music also richness of expression. But for me, the Baroque music really speaks personally to each one of us. And maybe that's why it's very attracting and soothing to listen to.
I agree with you, and I think I have to think long and hard if I've ever heard ugly Baroque music. Somehow, all of it is nice to listen to. You know, I think that's one of the big reasons. So, dames en here, dit is nou die geleentheid vir u om 'n vraag te vra in English of Afrikaans aan hierdie drie barokmusiek musisi op die verhoog. Iemand het gister 'n mikrofoon hier rond gehad. As hy nie 'n mikrofoon is nie, ek sal u kan hoor. Ja meneer, u hand was eerste op. Double stop and slide.
Kan jy patrone in die speel kry? Amper soos 'n lute of 'n gitaar?
Can I just repeat the question for everybody who didn't hear that? He's asking on her viola di gamba, there are lines on the fingerboard. Can she play double stops, so 2 notes at once? And can she make slides? Slides in Baroque music, wow.
Yes and yes. The full answer being that the viola da gamba is not from the modern string family at all. It derives directly from the lute. So your question is exactly on point. It is a guitar with a curved fingerboard and curved bridge so that it can be played with a bow. It's basically the same thing. I don't know, you might have noticed when I pluck the strings, it has a very full lute-like sound. It works, it is basically a lute. And yes, I can play the chords just like it's in fact tuned like a guitar as well. It's not tuned like a cello. There's another reason why it gets really challenging if you're tired. You start playing cello fingerings, oops. But yes, in the first piece I played where I was doing mad things with the bow, those were all chords, D minor, A major, F major, coming out. You can slide, but it's going to sound like it does on a guitar. It sounds, it's specific. But above the frets, of course, it plays like a modern cello. You can slide all you want up there.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, here's somebody in the middle, in the front. Thank you very much, Lizanne.
Hoekom sal mens kies om 'n stuk soos die Schonken op ou instrumente of op period instrumente te speel? Het julle dit al op moderne instrumente gespeel? Of is dit spesifiek, want ek het nou gedink aan die viola de gamba wat mos nou eintlik dalk sou mense met 'n gitaar vervang eerder as cello as jy met moderne instrumente speel.
Die Schonkenwerk is spesiaal gekomponeer vir hierdie instrumente. So dit Antoni en die bot het dele gekies uit barokmusiek of elemente van barokmusiek en dit geïnkorporeer vir hierdie 3 instrumente. So as ons dit op 'n moderne instrument moet speel, gaan ons dit moet verander. Veral en dit is geskryf vir 2 viola en viola de gamba. En natuurlik die viola de gamba part sal nie werk op die cello nie, maar ook daar was dele in dit wat die een deel, what was it, the Bordoon part? Dit is ja, soos as jy mens in AI intik, het jy al gesien daai wat sê AI is
Wat is AI?
artificial intelligence.
Is dit soos Google? ChatGPT sê een van die oudste lede hiervoor. Ja.
Moet ek dit nou regtig vertel?
Nie regtig, ek weet nie wat is AI nie.
Okay.
Ek deel nie in daai satanisme nie.
Artificial intelligence is 'n nuwe manier van dink wat nie deur mense gebeur nie. Dit gebeur deur
Satanisme.
Sjoe. Maar as 'n mens intik het, ek weet nie of julle al daai visuele demonstrasies gesien het van as jy vir AI vra hoe lyk ballet en dan kom hier 'n been uit die kop uit of so. Ek dink dit is op 'n manier 'n klein bietjie van dit waar iemand wat regtig weet wat barokmusiek is en 'n bot wat 'n idee het wat barokmusiek is, saamgewerk het om hierdie werk te doen. Vir ons is dit verskriklik mooi wanneer die barok elemente uitkom en ons kan sê, hierdie werk so goed en die harmonics of die official nie harmonics, wat is 'n harmonic in
Bootone.
bootone wat ons mis maak, dis die fluitnote wat soos klink asof ons fluit. Dit is eintlik verskriklik moeilik op gatsnare, moet ek nou vir julle eerlikwaar sê. Ons sukkel vir alles dit reën om daai klanke uit te kry. So dit is iets wat byvoorbeeld makliker sou gebeur op 'n moderne instrument. Maar dit is deel van die komposisie. Ons moet dit laat werk. Maar ons moet wel ons tegniek aanpas op die barok instrument om dit te kan laat gebeur. Do you want to add something?
Dit sal miskien interessant wees om te weet dat Antoni in die score het hy vir ons geskryf nou en dan dat die klank brekerig moet wees en hy wil hierdie klank gehad het. And actually before he wrote the piece, I think it's the first piece he's composed for viola da gamba. We had a workshop, he and I, where I showed him what is possible on the instrument. And he uses a lot the open strings in this. The specific chord that comes out from a viola da gamba would be very different from a modern instrument. Yes.
I have one more question before we give somebody else the chance. I am extremely money-minded, as people know. That's why I do so much in my life for free. But your Baroque instruments, are they more worth than your modern instruments, or is it cheap to buy these old things because nobody wants them anymore? How does that work in relation?
I think it depends a bit. There are some original Baroque instruments floating around the world. But most, at least of the viola da gamba world, I'll speak from that perspective, most of the instruments are built new. Mine, I think, was built in 2007. And it's at that stage, and like really the rise of the viola da gamba only started again in the 80s or so with the big resurgence of early music. So the instruments are not yet nearly on the same price level as modern instruments, which are astoundingly expensive, especially the older they are. Yes, I would say a fraction of the cost, but the originals will be equally expensive.
The strings are cheaper than a modern violin strings.
Can I just interject there? So you say the strings are cheaper. So ladies and gentlemen, jy het almal gehoor die snare is actual gut snare. So that means it's the inside of a cat, right?
No, sheep.
Sheep. Okay. With responsibly sourced diamonds or chocolate or coffee or even with organic meat these days, you know where it comes from. Do you have the name of the sheep or where it lived before it was turned into a violin string?
No, but we know who ate him.
We definitely dedicate part of our music to these beautiful souls.
Sheep may
And
safely
we play
graze.
for them.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, sorry, you said the strings are cheaper and then you wanted to continue?
But also, we like my violin is made in 1950s and as a modern violin, but with the help of a violin maker from Cape Town, I converted my modern instrument into a baroque instrument, changing the fingerboard, some other settings on it. So we can make from a modern violin a baroque style violin.
Yes.
Which is the same price as a modern violin.
Modern violin.
It
Good.
doesn't.
Annien, and yours?
So I am actually fortunate enough I play on an actual Baroque violin, but it's not a very valuable instrument. I mean, if all the exceptionally valuable existing Baroque instruments are in museums or on loan to the world's best Baroque players like Rachel Podger and in Europe. But my violin, at some point in its life, was converted from a Baroque violin to a modern violin and has been reconverted into its original form. What I can say is because the instruments are very, very thin, the wood is very thin and the gut strings snap quite quickly, the maintenance of these instruments are a little bit more expensive than the maintenance of modern instruments. We know how to handle modern instruments, and if we had our modern instruments here today, none of us would be worried about them cracking, but or tuning issues or strings snapping on stage. But these are things that do happen with the Baroque instruments, especially the older ones, because they are exceptionally fragile.
Thank you very much. Enige iemand anders met nog 'n vraag? Ja, hier voor is nog iemand. Dankie, Lizanay.
Rosamund, I want to know, you've got a totally different bow grip. Why is that? What is the
Just
reason
explain how your bow grip looks different from what the normal grip would be, please. Use the mic, please.
Oh, sorry. This is going to be hard.
I'll hold the mic for you.
Thank you. If this is the bow, the cello grip is from the top.
Yes.
And for the gamba, it's from the bottom. And you have your two fingers directly on the hair of the bow, kind of pulling it.
Oh.
And thank you. The reason is purely traditional somehow. The first bow grips recorded in art and text are from underneath. Even the early cellists played with an underhold. You can see it in some paintings. It's very interesting. And then I think as the strings started getting more tense, they started wanting more and more sound out of the instruments. They thought could use more down force from the top, and which is why the bow grip was changed. But it's still practice for cellists in the Baroque scene also to play with the under grip. You won't see it around here, but mostly Netherlands or so. I've seen this happen in Switzerland. Yes.
And I also want to know, wat die ornamentasie betref, julle sê, jy besluit sommer wat jy vandag gaan doen. Maar moet julle ooreenkom om 'n sekere ornamentasie te gebruik of sal dit altyd pas? whatever jy doen.
Okay, and
Just explain ornamentation for somebody who doesn't know. She asked about the ornamentation.
I'm going to answer in English so that Ralitza can also jump in. So, ornamentation are the little notes that we add in between the written notes of the composers, which is
Versierings.
expected of the performers. Now, yes, we are free to do what we want, but the more you study, the more you realize there were certain rules or practices that were applied per region and per composer and per period of Baroque playing. So yes, so for example, the ornamentation that you would use in Corelli is different than the ornamentation that you would use in Telemann, being Italian and German, and also of different practices. The French, for example, did not, they had a complete chart of symbols that they would write on top of the notes, and you would have to ornament according to the symbols that they put, where Corelli wrote almost nothing, like a skeleton of notes, and then you would have to fill it in. The Italians had more, somebody once explained it to me.
I think we're back. That is maar
Was
net
dit
die...
ek?
Nee.
Okay. So between in Italian ornamentation, you would string strands of flowers between the notes. And in French ornamentation, you would bejewel every single note that had an embellishment on top of it. So those are two different approaches. I don't know, Ralitza, if you want to... Ralitza, if I may say, is one of the most expressive people I've ever met in my life. And she will definitely ornament according to the mood that she feels that day, the composition that needs to be performed. And also, it's quite relative to the amount of coffee she's had on the morning.
I always say two bananas before a concert, so I'm calm. Yes, but ornamentation is very personal as well. Even if, like let's say French school with all this ornamentation meticulously on each note, yet the composer leave the personal element of the performer to shine through it, and the performer can add more or omit some of the ornamentations in order to express the certain effect only described by the performer. So it's a very personal, and as Annien said, we are very aware which composer we play, from which country he is, and what style, early Baroque or late Baroque music. So we take special care to reproduce what meant to be on that particular time and period.
Thank you very much. One last question, then we're out of time, ladies and gentlemen. Anybody with one last question?
Maybe I'm displaying my ignorance here, but I was wondering, why don't you use the normal shoulder rest that I am used to seeing on?
That's a very good question. So normally under the modern violin, you have a shoulder rest that goes on your shoulder that's between you and the instrument, but you forgot yours at home, right?
On purpose. Yes, modern violins, because they require much more high register and virtuosity in a different style, different way, requires, and it's much more comfortable to use shoulder rest. But here in the Baroque music and playing with Baroque instruments, we also need to manipulate the sound through being closer to our body. So it is a way of curving the sound through the bow, through our shoulder rest, without the shoulder rest. So it is more in practice to use a violin without the shoulder rest. And also in seeing from early paintings, the violinists in the Baroque era were not holding the violin on the shoulder, but slightly here in the chest, like this. If you see painting, if you remember, it's really the violin is much lower than the high in the shoulder, like later on in 18th, 19th century. So also being there, you don't really need shoulder rest.
Yes, also the chin rest. I don't know if you saw, we don't have chin rests on the instruments. they were only invented around about 1820, 1822. The first patents of chin rests was actually captured by Louis Spohr, and it was to take the chin off the body of the instrument, which slightly dampens the sound. So the first designs were not about shifting, but they did realize it does influence the ease of shifting. But it was so that the chin could be held above the body of the instrument, which dampens the sound. And this also led to, like Ralitza said, it was held lower and we have more movement of the instrument. So when you play the Baroque violin, you kind of play with both sides. The right arm goes this way, but the violin also comes this way. So if you want to make more sound, you bring the two together. And if you want to make less sound, you remove them away from each other. So that also helps with sound contribution.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your knowledgeable answers. It's incredible. Dames en here, hierdie was die laaste musiekgesprek vir hierdie jaar se Klein Karoo Klassiek. Ek wil u baie bedank dat u so wonderlike gehoor was wat met diep en insigryke vrae na ons toe gekom het. Dankie vir u konsentrasie en beluistering en vir almal wat gelukkig by 'n glasie wyn kon uitkom. Baie dankie dat julle die kroeg ondersteun het. Ek kry 10% van alles wat daar verkoop. Dis hoekom ek dit die hele tyd aanmoedig. Dit was regtig my voorreg om hierdie musiekgesprekke te kon aanbied. But one last thank you to our fantastic musicians of this morning. Thank you for making our Sunday start on such a refined, musical, very old-fashioned, but very refined and musical way. We love it, and we wish you all the best and hope to see you again back at Klassiek someday. Dames en here,